I always dread leaving my garden even for a few days during summer when the days are hot and blazing in my Northern California garden. That's why I've been experimenting with self-watering planters for quite a while, because they can really bring peace of mind. Hey folks, if we haven't met before, my name is Tara and I am no stranger to blazing heat over here in California. The temperatures often reach 110 degrees Fahrenheit during the middle of summer, and every year it seems like those heat waves last a little bit longer and fry a little bit harder. So I have got to set up irrigation, and without that, my garden will absolutely be devastated during the heat of summer. But self-watering planters have been an interesting experiment that I've been trying for a while. And today I'm going to be unboxing something that might be one of the best I've tried so far. I'm really excited about it. So let's go ahead and open the EZCube from Vego Garden. Now, I do own several self-watering planters from Vego Garden, and they are absolutely well known for their high quality products as well as for their great innovation. And this particular planter has some really neat engineering that I think I'm going to have a lot of fun putting together, even though I'm not exactly the person in my house who puts things together. That's my husband. But I think this one's going to be super easy, even for someone like me. It's going to bring out the kid in me. So let's go ahead and put this together. Now, the first thing you need to do is make sure that you have all of the parts. So I like to lay them all out on the ground and check off all the parts that are indicated in the manual. Now, they've got a really detailed manual, very well written, but let's face it, I'm not a real manual kind of person. I tend to like to figure things out by doing, and if I make mistakes, I can always redo it, right? All right, got it all laid out. I've got the water reservoir, the wicking cells, the legs, the panels. And the first thing to do is to fasten the drainage outlet. Make sure to tighten properly. You do not want any leakages from the reservoir. Let's put the legs on now. I got the longer legs because I want my planter to be a little bit raised. And one of the things that I really like about this planter is that it is actually extensible. So this actually is one unit, but I've added on two, and I've made 2 units, so it's a little bit of a longer planter, and you can keep going and extend it however far you want to extend it to. And the original planter actually comes with shorter legs, but this is an option. You can get these extended legs. I wanted a little bit of an elevated planter. It is just so much easier on my back. Let me show you this other planter that I got from Vego Garden that is elevated, and oh my gosh, it is a game changer for me. Just so easy to work with, and it is growing so well. Yeah, so I put together this planter like literally 3 months ago, and it is just gorgeous. You can hardly see anything in it. The marigolds have decided they wanted to own this planter, even though it's supposed to be an herb planter. I've got a tomato plant growing here that I didn't even plant in the first place. It's a volunteer. And so is this cucumber vine. And I've got parsley, I've got chamomile, I've got oregano, I've got basil somewhere in there, which is not visible. I've got some green onions, I've got some wild arugula, and these petunias, no, they are actually in little hanging baskets in the front here that are not Vego Garden products, but yeah, it looks pretty. So I put it there, and it's got that little shelf at the bottom that is so convenient. Now, I've also got this planter from Costco. You can tell the difference between them right away. This is not a very good quality planter. It's also a self-watering planter, by the way. This one isn't, but this one is. And it is just, yeah. I mean, I've been using it for many years and it has functioned really well, but the quality, I just don't even try to move it because it will fall apart on me. I just know that that's going to happen. In fact, you can even see that the watering reservoir underneath is a little bit crooked, so I won't dare to move it, versus this one moves super smoothly. I made a whole video on this, so I'm not going to repeat myself, but I will put a link to it. Go and check that video where I actually put this planter together. It is doing so phenomenally well. I do want to check to make sure that there is no water leak in this before I put the rest of the parts together as well as the soil. So let's fill this up. While this is filling up, I wanted to show you how this mechanism works. Now, this here is the water level indicator. So as the water fills up in the reservoir below, you will see this indicator start to rise up. And it will rise all the way up to max when it is full. And then when it is empty, it drops and you know that you need to refill it. So as that is filling up there, I wanted to show you this outlet spout right here. Now you can see that it is filling up. You can see the water level there, and you can put it in this 90-degree angle, which means that it will fill the entire reservoir. However, if you want there to be less water for whatever reason, say you're getting plenty of rain and you don't want this thing to have too much water in it, you can actually change the level of the water. And as it reaches whatever level you set it to, it will start to overflow from the spout. So say, let's do 0. That means nothing, no water in the reservoir at all. You can see it flowing out there. But I don't want to do that. I actually want to fill up the reservoir. Now, one of the really nice things about this planter is the amount of water that can be held in this reservoir. I believe it's something like 20 gallons versus this planter. My little old planter, Cedarcraft planter from Costco, holds only about 6 gallons of water, which means that actually during the heat of summer, the plants drink up all the water. I can't even go for more than a day because the water completely gets absorbed, especially if you've got bigger plants like tomatoes growing in here. They'll drink up all the water. So 6 gallons doesn't do very much. 20 gallons, on the other hand, is a completely different story. Now you can see as this continues to fill, that these little wicking cells at the bottom are starting to fill up with water. Now, when I fill this with soil, the soil is going to get into that and it is going to pull water by capillary action up into the planter. So that's how the self-watering feature works. Okay, no leaks, so we can continue our build. Okay, this is where I really felt like I was a kid again, you guys, playing with Legos or Lincoln Logs or Connects or something like that. It was just so much fun to slide those pieces in. They are so well made and slide together just perfectly. And oh, by the way, I did not yet need that manual. It was really straightforward and simple and oh, so satisfying. And this is a dividing brace that keeps the two separate sections nice and tightly connected to each other. And this brace keeps the panels from bowing inward or outward, both of which can happen due to the weight of the soil. All right, all set up. Now, before we fill it up with soil, one more feature I wanted to draw to your attention was this air ease vent. Now, this is used to fill up the water, obviously, but air can flow all the way through this and all the way out through this. So it creates a nice air circulation just underneath this plastic cover over the reservoir, and that really helps the roots breathe. And that is really important when you've got self-watering planters. One of the biggest problems is that the plant roots can start to suffocate and then they will rot. And this actually is something that all of Vego Garden self-watering planters have, is great air circulation so that the roots don't rot. And that's what makes the plants grow so healthy. All right, so we had fun setting up this planter, and now we're going to be filling it up with soil, and I'm going to talk about what kind of soil you need for it because it's not any old soil, and we're going to be planting it up with some of my favorite plants. But before we do that, let's talk just a little bit about why a self-watering planter is such a neat idea. So reason number one, this self-watering planter means you need to water less often. This 20-gallon tank underneath here, this reservoir, it's huge and it can last for several days depending on what type of plants you put in it. And watering less often also means that you can go out of town for a few days at a time without worrying about the plants that are in your self-watering planters. And it's one less thing for whoever it is that is taking care of your plants to have to deal with. And in my case, it's usually my poor father-in-law that's stuck with the job of looking after my plants while I'm away. And it's a little unfair to him. He's not getting any younger. So this really makes a difference to my family. Another benefit of bottom watering is there is much less water that is lost to evaporation. So if you see my raised beds over here, I have to put a thick layer of mulch because these are top watered and there's so much water that evaporates. So with the bottom watering, technically you may not even need to mulch because the plants are getting the water from the bottom. I would probably still mulch just because that's what I do over here in California, but gosh, self-watering is just genius. And there's one more thing. Okay, so I have a problem with rats, voles, mice in my garden, and I have watched them. I've set up cameras and watched them, and I've seen them easily scale up the sides of my wooden raised beds. I am hoping that these nice smooth legs and surfaces are going to be difficult for the rats to climb onto. What do you guys think? I guess we're going to find out. Okay, let's talk about soil for your planter, or should I say, potting mix, because you do not want to put anything that contains soil in your planter. That means no topsoil, no raised bed mix, none of that. It has to be a potting mix, and it needs to be super light. That is probably the most important property to make this planter work properly. It's working by way of capillary action, a difference in soil moisture level between the water below and the soil above, and that causes the water to be drawn up. And with heavy soil, you're just going to throw that whole equation off. And also, it's going to lead to more chances of root rot, and things are just going to weigh down. This is an elevated planter, so you want to make sure your soil is as light as possible. Now, I DIY my own soil mixes, and the recipe is really simple. I've got 1 part of peat moss or coco coir, and I've got 1 part of compost. It's usually my homemade compost, so it's super rich. And then the third item is a mixture of perlite and vermiculite. And those are the items that are really going to lighten up your potting mix, especially perlite. Vermiculite does hold on to water, though it is very light as well. But perlite doesn't hold on to water. It just sort of keeps all of those soil-less particles apart, and then creates that great aeration that is so essential for root health and plant development. Now, if you're not into DIY, that's perfectly okay as well. Just get a really high quality potting mix. And I always recommend adding perlite to it. You can see I buy it in bulk. This is a 4 cubic foot bag of perlite, and I go through it very quickly because I've got a lot of planters. But you can see how lightweight it is. Look at that. Yeah, so this thing does kick up dust though when you use it. Make sure that you wear a mask. I've actually already pre-mixed it over here because I didn't want to deal with the dust on camera, but definitely make sure you wear a mask. You do not want to be breathing all of that stuff into your lungs. Okay, so let's go ahead and fill this up. Now this takes actually about 5.6 cubic feet of potting mix, and that's a really decent amount of potting mix that you can grow all kinds of stuff in. I'm going to be alternating my compost with this mix because I didn't mix my compost in. And this is heavy. Compost does tend to be a little heavier, especially if you've got wonderful things like worm castings like I do in my compost. Oh, look at all those worms. I got to show you. I remember when I first started making worm castings, I could not touch worms, and now I have no problem at all. And I get so excited when I see them. Look at that. Oh. Now you can add any other amendments of your choice to this. I typically add slow release fertilizer for sure. Another advantage of having the planter this high is it is so easy on my back even to mix the soil. I hardly have to bend. It is so therapeutic to play in the mud. No wonder kids love to do it. Now, to make my point about using any potting soil, I'm also going to be adding some Miracle-Gro potting mix. This is commonly available in Costco. I know some people don't like using Miracle-Gro, and you do you, but I want to just make sure that you can have access to something that is easily available, at least in the United States, and then just add perlite to it, which is what I'm going to do to fill up the rest of this planter. A couple of additional things that I like to add to my potting mixes. This over here is azomite. Now, did you know that plants require 17 different essential macro and micronutrients in order to thrive? So the macronutrients are things like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. And then the micronutrients are things like iron and molybdenum and selenium and manganese and magnesium and things like that. So azomite, which is basically pulverized rock dust, volcanic rock dust, claims to contain a range of micronutrients in a form that can rapidly be assimilated by your plants because it is powdered so fine. So Does it really help or not? I'm not really sure, but it definitely makes me feel better. Another thing that definitely does help is granular fertilizer. I always add it. This is one of my favorites, Espoma Planttone, not sponsored, but I love it. Use it all the time. I will put links to these items in the description in case you're interested in purchasing them. And by the way, I'm also a Vego Garden affiliate. So if you do decide to purchase any Vego Garden products or this wonderful planter, please do use my affiliate link in the description. It will go a long way to support my channel. And you can also take $10 off your entire purchase with the code GREENLOVE. Thank you so much for your support. Don't forget to hit that like button. So these things kick up a lot of dust as well. So you got to get that mask on. It goes a long way. Now add a good amount of fertilizer, more than you think that you need. You're growing some hungry plants in here potentially, so make sure that they get well fed. Now I added the whole bag of potting mix. You can see that it doesn't have hardly any perlite at all, so I've got to add some additional to supplement it. Okay, are we ready to talk about what we're going to plant? First off, I am going to be planting marigolds again. You saw how successful they were in my other planter. So can't go wrong. I'm going to be planting these up front. Got to bring in those pollinators and keep those pests away, right? And then secondly, this is really, really special to me. These are what's called cluster beans. And this was the very, very first vegetable that I planted when I was 7 years old in India. They're called guar beans in India. In South India, where I come from, they're called kotrangai. And my mother used to harvest bunches and bunches of beans. That's why they're called cluster beans, because they grow in clusters. And she used to make this dish, just kind of like a stir fry with a little bit of seasoning and onions and coconut. It was so good with a little bit of rice and yogurt. We used to eat this so often. So these I'm growing after, gosh, many, many years. Let's just say I'm going to be eating them for the first time if they grow successfully. So I am super, super excited about this. And it also brings back memories from my childhood, my happy childhood, and my wonderful mother who taught me all about gardening. And then, of course, I got to have tomatoes, right? But not just any tomatoes. I am planting dwarf tomatoes. So I've got a couple of choices over here. This one is Rosella Purple, and I've got it growing in a different part of the garden. I took a little cutting, rooted it, and I love that plant. It is growing huge and it is loading up. So dwarf tomatoes, you guys, if you haven't grown them before, they are wonderful, especially in planters like this, because they have been bred to be smaller in size. So they grow no more than about 3 to 4 feet tall. And many of them are indeterminate, so they will keep producing all season long. Full-size tomatoes, none of your small micro tomato business. And I found that they're also relatively disease resistant. So I am excited to grow these. You can also save seeds from them. They're open pollinated. So I've got 2 varieties. I'm not sure whether I'll grow both. I do tend to overdo my planters, as you saw on the other one. So I may just plant one of these, or I may plant both. This one is called Boronia, another cutting that I took from one of my dwarf tomatoes. So that's a tip for you guys. If you want to succession plant tomatoes, rather than start them from seed, take cuttings of suckers from your existing plants. They root so much faster and they grow so much quicker, and you can have a second season of tomatoes, especially if you live in places like Texas and Florida and other places where it gets really too hot to grow tomatoes in summer. You can grow fall tomatoes by keeping some cuttings ready. And then I am going to be growing this Peruvian pepper. It's given to me by a dear friend, and she promised me that it is one of the most delicious peppers, super sweet and very productive. So very keen to grow this. I'm going to have to space them so that the tomatoes don't shade out the pepper. That was a mistake I made in my other elevated planter. I planted the pepper too close to the tomatoes and they just kind of grew over it and took over. So I'm going to be growing this kind of in front and the tomatoes maybe in the back. Let's go ahead and get them planted up. I actually found another dwarf tomato called Tasmanian, which I like even better than Boronia. So I'm going to plant this one. Let's start with the tomatoes because they're going to be the largest plants, and it has rooted so well. Look at that. So I'm going to be planting this up at the back here. Now you'll notice that I have actually tamped down. The soil's looking kind of smooth because I actually gently tamped it down. You don't want to push too hard, but you don't want to leave it too fluffy either because it's all going to sink. And then you have to keep backfilling it. So I did tamp it down already. Just like that. My first tomato is planted. Let's go ahead and do the other one. Let's see, Rosella Purple. Let's see whether this has rooted. Yep, You can see the roots. So that goes right here. And then I'm going to be planting my pepper up front here. Ooh, plenty of roots. Tease them out a little bit so that they start to grow outward rather than curl around. And then I'm just going to intersperse the beans here and there. I've got about 10 plants. I don't know, I'm contemplating whether or not I should grow a couple of cucumbers. You guys tell me what you think. I'm always overdoing it when it comes to filling up these planters. And they can handle it usually, but it just gets so crowded. I'm going to separate these out a little bit. Got to be gentle with beans. They do not like their roots disturbed very much. So do this carefully. A very special bean plant. Now, planting things closer together actually helps keep the soil cooler, kind of like a mulch, a living ground cover, if you will. Okay, and then we'll just plant marigolds up front here. That's it, it's all planted up, and now I'm going to give it its initial watering, which is so important. My mother used to call it the water of life because it really helps the plant establish, get those roots all settled in, and get them off to a good start. This hose, by the way, is also a Vego Garden product. It has been an absolute game changer in my garden. I'll put a link to a video where I actually installed it. I love it. I don't know how I ever lived without it. So thank you folks for joining me on this little setup journey. I will keep you informed as to how the cluster beans are doing and as to whether or not the rats are able to get into this planter. Until next time, folks, live green and love your greens.